All right, we sound clear. All right, I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to the first podcast. Today's Friday, April 24th, 2020, coming at you around 4 o'clock p.m. And, we got a lot on the radar today. Obviously, everyone's talking about the coronavirus. I wanted to do basically a little podcast, a segment talking about current events and things that are going on in the world. I'm going to take a little break on just documenting my health journey and stuff and just kind of bring you guys some current events and things that I've been looking at. And I didn't really want to touch too much on the virus because everyone's talking about it, but I was going to talk about something that is closely related to the virus, and that is the potential food shortages that we face in the United States and the global food shortages that we face collectively as well. I'm sure you guys have seen some headlines, some crazy headlines all over the place. CNN had one that was famine of biblical proportions, and New York Times is talking about global food shortages, and you're seeing it all over the place now. So it's interesting to see the mainstream is finally starting to latch on to these narratives, even though you can follow people that have been talking about it for years now. One in particular, Ice Age Farmer. He's been talking about food shortages for years now, honestly, and he's been talking about the grand solar minimum and the solar cycles, how it affects crop losses. There's been late winters and muddy soils, which is really leading to devastating crop losses. And there's been canned food shortages. I read an article about a year ago about canned food shortages. And even there was an article that coincidentally was 1 year ago today, and it was India imports meat from Brazil. And then it was like a meat shortage or something along those lines is what it was talking about. And all these mainstream sources are claiming that the coronavirus is to blame for these food shortages, which I'm not saying it's not playing a role, but it is a little interesting to see that there were people talking about these food shortages coming a year ago and even further back than a year ago. So it kind of makes you think really what's going on. I read another headline also about oil being under $0 a barrel, which is supposed to be really affecting the food shortages as well. And granted, it's cool to have cheap gas, but it really shows the economic turmoil that we're facing. So it's a little scary, but I do think that there are things that we can do to help support each other, and one of which I do think is supporting local farms, getting into producing your own food, start a garden. I've been really getting at my family, sounded like a broken record about getting a chicken coop. I really want to get a chicken coop. We got to focus on animal nutrition. We got to focus on getting as much calories as we can. Honestly, if we face a food shortage, you want to make sure that you're producing your own food. We don't want to rely on these major corporations that are destroying the environment, spraying pesticides all over our food, tilling the soil, destroying the topsoil, and, just honestly doing unsustainable farming practices that is not really a way to feed us, and it's not helping or it's not conducive for our health. So I think really being in charge of your own food is the way to go. A lot of people always say, well, how is local food going to feed the world? But I don't think we're all meant to focus on feeding the world. I think we should focus on feeding ourselves, feeding our community, feeding our family. And if we teach each other regenerative grazing techniques and teaching each other ways of producing our own food sustainably, I think it is possible. And to tell somebody it's not possible is just, shooting it down before you've even tried it. So I think really we should focus on doing things like that. I'm sure a lot of you guys have also seen that the pork processing facilities have shut down. The biggest one in the country was Tyson facility, like Waterloo or something like that, and it was shut down. And about 15% of the world's, or 15% of the United States pork production has been removed, and that's huge. If I go to Aldi right now, there's absolutely no pork in the store. So it's a pretty big deal to think about that, And that's another reason why I'm pushing people to start supporting local farms. And I really think it's the move. You're seeing also the World Food Program was warning that 130 million people could be at the brink of starvation due to the coronavirus and due to the oil prices dropping and just bad harvest seasons in general. So that's also huge. It's really sad to see, and my heart goes out to the people in the third world that are going to be facing these problems. I believe there was Afghanistan, Ghana, Yemen, South Sudan, Congo, Venezuela, among some to name a few. But it's really unfortunate. The LA Times said something about Iowa being the biggest hog state and the National Guard being deployed. I also read a Bloomberg article talking about the same thing. And I really want to prevent that stuff from happening here. We don't want the National Guard giving out resources to people. You know, we don't want things to get to that point. But in Iowa, it seems to already be taking place. So I think that supporting your local farm and getting involved in starting your own garden and producing your own food is what's going to get us out of this. Love, not fear. We can't give in to the fear because that is really what is going on. All the fear mongering in the media is kind of ridiculous. And that's one thing I wanted to focus on in this video. I wanted to focus on the problems that we face collectively, but give out some solutions that could help one another as well. Max Egan is he said it perfectly. He said, you always have two choices, and that's either fear or love. And love is what's going to get us out of this. If you choose fear, you're screwed. But as you can see with what's going on, a lot of people are choosing fear. A lot of people are choosing hysteria, hysterical buying, panic buying. I read an article where there was 23 million chickens that were slaughtered because they cannot get to the market. The supply chain is broken completely. So you can't get these chickens to market, so people can't get the food. And there was a law passed in Wyoming where ranchers can sell their meat directly to the consumers so they don't have to rely on this supply chain that is potentially melting down before our eyes. And I think that should be implemented everywhere. I think everywhere really needs to start adopting that law. So, I mean, it kind of gives me a little bit of faith. And I also kind of wanted to touch on the CO2 shortages, the potential CO2 shortages that could affect soda production. It could affect beer production, but also it affects refrigeration and it affects water. So we could potentially be facing a water crisis as well. And that is scary. Like, that alone makes you think, I don't even know what I would do in that kind of situation. That's probably also going to call for the National Guard to start, rationing out resources to people. But at the end of the day, I think producing your own food is critical. It is the move. I mean, I might even start collecting rainwater. Who knows? I don't even know if that's legal by me. Where I live, they don't allow chicken coops, but I'm at the point where I'm ready to build the chicken coop. Well, they don't allow hens. I can have a chicken coop, but I can't have the hens. So I might just have the coop. I have a friend that has chickens. He's the one who supplies me with eggs as well. And I might just have the coop, and just in case. And then if anything really bad happens, I'll have the coop all ready to go, basically. And I got enough land at my house that we have started a garden and things like that. It's at my parents' house, but pretty much I think we have a lot to focus on collectively, but just keep in mind that love is what's going to get us out of this. Don't give in to the fear. And in all honesty, if you're a healthy person, if you're living a healthy life, you exercise, you eat somewhat of a healthy diet, and you don't have a compromised immune system, being so scared of this virus is not making sense. There's more and more data coming out every single day that is showing that you will be okay. If you're a healthy individual, you're young, you're resilient, you will be okay. I believe there was a study that came out and it showed that the death rate was about 0.1 to 0.3%. It was about less than the flu, or if not just about as deadly as the flu. But I mean, granted, for your grandparents, immune compromised individuals, people in nursing homes, quarantine those people, keep them safe. I completely agree with that. But I think that the longer that we keep ourselves quarantined and the more that we destroy the economy, the more of a potential of these food shortages that we face it's going to affect everybody. And instead of giving your money to these corporations that are out here destroying the environment and destroying the soil, we should really focus on supporting and producing our own food, supporting local farms and producing our own food. That is critical, and I can't say that or stress that enough. Anyone that knows me knows that I lost my health. I completely watched myself wither away, could barely get out of bed. I was dealing with symptoms of muscular dystrophy, of ALS. My doctors thought that I was dealing with a neurodegenerative disease. I had muscle wasting beyond belief, got down to 102 pounds, and then I started focusing on high quality animal nutrition, and it really changed my life. And another thing also that I really wanted to talk about was Alan Savory versus Bill Gates. I haven't really heard many people talking about that. Both of them seem very passionate about helping Africa. And it seems like although Bill Gates gives them food today, feeds them right now, make sure they don't die, it's rice and beans. There's no nutrition. I mean, granted, it gets you by another day, but it's not sustainable. It's genetically modified, it's fortified, and it's Monsanto pesticide-laden food. Meanwhile, Alan Savory, his tactics might not give you food right away, but he's teaching people regenerative grazing practices, reversing desertification. I believe, I don't remember the exact number, but he's reversed so many acres of desertification. It's not even funny. Anyone who wants more information about that, I really, really recommend watching his TED Talks, where he talks about the amount of desertification that he's been able to reverse using ruminant grass-fed animals. And it's another thing too is, it does take time, but teaching people to produce their own food in Africa is the way to help Africa. So when the food system collapses and the supply chain just completely withers away in front of our eyes, they don't have to depend on these unsustainable agriculture practices to feed them. They can feed themselves, similar to what the Maasai does, and they use grazing animals, and I believe they consume a lot of raw dairy. And I think that if most people started using those practices, that could potentially feed everybody. That could be a way to feed the world. There was a guy that I saw on YouTube, and he did the 30-day like grow your own food challenge or something like that, and he was able to live off of all the food that he produced for 30 days, and it was in an urban environment like Los Angeles. So if he can do it, I really have faith that it is possible, and telling people that, oh, it's not going to feed the world is just shooting the idea down before you even attempt it. And I think we should at least try something a little more sustainable, because obviously what we're doing is not really working. So I think looking into Alan Savory, for everyone who doesn't know who he is really, really critical to look into him. And I always hear people talking about Bill Gates and what he's doing for Africa. It seems like the only person truly helping the third world is Alan Savory. And when the World Food Program warns that 130 million people are at the brink of starvation, I think it's more critical now than ever to start implementing his tactics and ways of farming and producing food. It really is the move. So, I really appreciate everyone that tunes in to everything that's been going on. I might touch up on another video about the CO2 shortages and get a little more in depth on how that could affect our water supply. But at the end of the day, I really think that we should just take things one step at a time. Try not to give in to the fear too much. Stay safe, wash your hands, stay clean, stay sanitary, but don't go overboard with it. Bleaching your entire house and staying overly sanitary is worse for your immune system than just, you gotta stress your body a little bit to get stronger. You gotta break down some muscle tissue to build some muscle tissue, basically. So once again, I appreciate everyone that's been tuning in to all my videos. I'm gonna keep uploading as much as possible. And keep in mind that love will get us out of this. Start collecting seeds, start your gardens, keep your freezers stocked, support local farms, and look at Alan Savory and research regenerative grazing practices, because that is what's going to get us out of this. Not giving all of our money to Walmart, basically. So I appreciate everyone that's tuned in. Thanks again, guys. Keep in mind, your health is in your hands.